Hello, this is Ron Gerber of AngelBeat. I'm so glad to have Donovan from Logicworks here to present on the AWS Control Tower capabilities. Just to give you some background, Donovan has spoken at probably 20 live AngelBeat events over the past few years. He is absolutely great. Attendees love him because he understands technology. He knows what all the major cloud providers like AWS and Azure can offer end users, but just as importantly, he has a very good perspective on how to deploy technology. One of the things about Control Tower is that while it may not be as glamorous as AI and IoT solutions, it is incredibly important as organizations of all sizes need to properly control access to applications. They need to ensure that when people use AWS, it is secure, they are following all appropriate compliance and regulatory parameters. They have to make sure that spending is under control so individuals aren't running up unforeseen and unplanned bills with AWS, etc. So lots of valuable information here. Just to give you some background on Logicworks, they are a key strategic partner of all the major cloud providers, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and others. The focus of this talk is on the AWS Control Tower platform. We're going to have additional webinars featuring Logicworks expertise on other AWS solutions and the Azure platform. I think it's important to recognize these capabilities because so many organizations are looking to support or implement multi-cloud environments. They just don't want to have everything AWS, they don't want to have everything Azure, and that's where a trusted partner such as Logicworks can be incredibly useful. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to Donovan to talk about Control Tower.
Thanks, Ron. And as Ron said, this is it's more of a foundational environment. It's not the most cutting edge infrastructure or DevOps or AI, ML, IoT, but in order to do all of those things, you need to make sure that you have a proper and sound foundation in place. And so what I want to talk to today is building a multi-account strategy in AWS using Control Tower. And so with that said, I'll give a little introduction of myself. My name is Donovan Brady. I'm the Solutions Architecture Team Lead at Logicworks, and I'm going to jump right into it. So, why do you need a multi-account structure? Well, let's start from the top. Every company is different, so they all have different setups for their different applications and their security controls. If there are multiple teams with multiple different applications, the chances are not every team will have the same level of access permissions in the environment. As you can see here, there's a client portal team, there's a compliance team, another web application team, and an accounting team. Now, all of these teams are going to have different access controls, especially in a compliant environment, right? So we want to make sure that the accounting team can't actually see the environments themselves. They're really only seeing that AWS Cost Explorer. And the compliance team doesn't really have direct access to write into those environments. However, the client portal and web application environments do, right? So we have these little keys that you see here represent IAM controls, allowing the client portal read and write access into their client portal network. The web application team has read and write access into their VPC. And then the accounting and compliance teams have read-only access. Each different VPC can be governing different applications or really whatever you want it to be. However, what happens when you need multiple levels of separation? As you can see here, we have a single VPC with both prod and dev environments within it. Now let's say, that's 2, that's easy to manage. What happens when you have 3, 4, 5, 10 different environments and you have multiple different software delivery lifecycle tiers that you need to progress your application through, right? There's really no good way to manage this. It's either in the same VPC with shared controls or multiple VPCs. But multiple VPCs can be difficult to manage, and not to mention, you have service limits that you have to be aware of as well. So we can solve this with a multi-account structure. A multi-account structure allows you to handle these restrictions in an organized way. These methods can be based on application type, team level, or really business need. As you can see here, We have a centralized managed account, and then we have a PCI regulated account, and then a PCI non-regulated account. And in the previous slide, you saw that we can break it down into multiple different business units or different teams that are going to be engaged. So just to summarize, we went through the SDLC tier, right? We want to make sure that you guys have that isolated by environment. We want to make sure that you have administrative isolation between your workloads as well. The view that we saw at the beginning, each team has its own permission and access requirements. Those can be defined at the account level rather than managing a giant IAM group with a ton of different users within an organization. Next, I like to couple these two together: limited visibility and discoverability of workloads and minimized blast radius. Now, what do those mean? Well, in the unlikely event that hopefully you don't get breached, but let's say you do, they breach your dev account. They're only going to get access to your dev resources. And if you're doing things in a best practice manner, you're not going to have secure, hyper-compliant workloads and data in your dev environment. So, okay, they got into your dev environment, but that's locked down. There's limited visibility into your production workload. They probably don't even have access to it unless you give them that access. Similarly, with the minimized blast radius, it's the same, but more for an operational event. So if a workload were to explode, for example, or something were to go down because of a component failure or a regional outage, you can manage that with multiple different accounts. Not just one account is going to go down. It's just the dev account would go down and your production environment would still be up, right? Finally, we have strong isolation for auditing data. If only a single application has compliant or sensitive data, you really only have to audit that application. However, if the application is intertwined with the rest of your environment, everything will have to be audited. Not saying that you shouldn't follow those best practices for everything, but having a smaller scope during an audit definitely helps things, both operationally and financially. So, what did AWS do? AWS did what they do best, and they put together an automation tool to help the community in this, right? The community made this paradigm shift a few years ago, and they said, okay, this is the new best practice. We're going to switch to a multi-account workload, and we're not really going to do multi-VPCs anymore. There's still multi-VPCs, but more in the multi-account structure, right? So AWS created the Control Tower. What is it? It's a prescriptive, secure, multi-account AWS environment that's really a great starting point for large-scale AWS migrations. It allows you to expand over time with the institution of new accounts for really whatever your purposes are, whether that's for a new business that you're rolling out, for a new application, or even for a dev team that needs a new playground. It allows you to define baseline requirements for each of these accounts while providing separations of concerns. While you're starting to roll out these new applications, your guys are testing, you've got these new softwares going, and you've got all this data flowing through the environment. You don't have to worry about these menial foundational requirements and making sure that it's all secure, because you know that from the onset, it is. The guardrails are already deployed in the environment by default. Finally, it allows you to logically separate your environments to prevent unintended changes to production, and it limits your threat exposure by minimizing footprints in a single account. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the AWS landing zone and are asking, well, what's the difference between AWS landing zone and control tower? Well, the landing zone was how this started. Landing zone is a concept that has been in cloud, in technology for a very long time. However, capital landing zone, capital L, capital Z, is the software-defined solution that AWS came out with a couple of years ago to manage this in an automated pipeline that you would manage yourself. However, it's a pretty intricate and complex solution. So they said, we really only want to release this to partners. So you have to engage a partner like Logicworks to allow you to manage this landing zone in your environment. Last year, AWS took it a step further and created this Control Tower. The Control Tower is a self-service console. In the AWS console itself, it allows you to click a few buttons and spin it up. It's basically an integrator of all the other AWS tools that are in this solution that we're going to go into in a little bit. It has a very well predefined set of solutions that are tied into, right? It's going to create your account structure. It's going to create your VPCs and your networking with those guardrails in place that we were talking about for security and logging and auditing. So let's go into what it actually looks like. So at the top level, you have a master organizational account, right? The master organizational account is going to have a few key things going on behind the scenes that you don't really see. First, it's going to have your Lambda functions that talk to your CloudFormation stack sets, the service catalog, and the SSM parameter store. These three things together create what used to be called the account vending machine, but in the control tower world is called the account factory. How does it work? Well, you define your parameters in the SSM parameter store and put those in your CloudFormation stack sets. That allows you to deploy these CloudFormation templates to new accounts on a repeatable basis. And that is done through the service catalog. So you can see any new account that maybe these three on the bottom or 10 more that you want to spin up, they're going to have whatever the default parameters are that you say from the beginning. It also creates these three accounts on the bottom here that you see, the shared services account, the logging account, and the security account with these guardrails in place. Each one is going to be defined with CloudTrail for logging, config for an X-ray view into what's actually changed in your environment, centralized logging into an S3 bucket, and IAM and SNS to allow you access and notifications on each environment. Now, those are just the three core accounts that are built at the onset, right? But you could also spin up new accounts as you need them, and you can create new centralized accounts as well. As you can see here, Logicworks usually likes to put in a networking or a billing tooling account so that you can see all data goes through a centralized ingress point through that networking account, and all of your billing tools can be managed and monitored in your billing centralized account. However, you could really have as many centralized accounts as you want, but the three core ones to remember that are always defined are security, logging, and shared services. So I want to step you through a few use cases that Logicworks has used this solution for. Usually they've been for larger scale migrations for hyper-compliant environments. So the first one is a large bank. Logicworks likes to work with a lot of hyper-compliant customers who like to keep their identities confidential. So we're just going to reference it as a large bank today. But they had the same case that most of you are probably realizing in this migration process. You have difficulty getting everybody on the same page. Every team wanted to configure and control AWS differently. However, they didn't want to disrupt what they already had going in their on-prem and private cloud environments. They wanted to keep those same kinds of access permissions and the DMZs and however you were configuring your networking pretty much the same, and just have that scalability and flexibility of moving to the cloud. They had hundreds of regulatory control environments, and each project required just a subset of these requirements. So what did we do? We created a multi-account landing zone for this customer. As you can see at the top here, I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit. Oh, nope, I can't. It's all right. You're going to squint your eyes a little bit, and you see the data centers at the top are connected via a direct connect through that networking account. As you can recall, Logicworks likes to have a networking account in really any of these landing zone control tower builds that we make. The networking traffic is going to go through a Cisco CSR, which is used for network address translation, so you can make sure that you don't have overlapping CIDR ranges and that you really have proper networking controls being input into your environment. So when you're connecting in, you go through that networking account, and then it can access the other accounts in the environment. As you can see in the top right, we have the shared services account. It has Active Directories, Ansible for centralized deployments. It has Bastion hosts for a centralized access point, and it has Puppet for configuration management. Down in the shared applications account, we can see there are the management tools that they use to run their business. They have Jira, they have Confluence, and they have a database that has storage access and user permissions stored in that database. Another use case that we have is similar story. There's a multi-billion-dollar asset management firm that were migrating hundreds of applications to AWS. They wanted to reduce their audit scope, but they spent millions of dollars a year on PCI compliance. They understood that they had tons of applications that had regulatory data in it, but they also had applications that didn't. So we decided to maintain 5 different accounts. There was a production regulated account, a production non-regulated account, a non-production regulated account, a non-production non-regulated, and that master account at the top that we would allow it via that account vending machine to ensure each child account is built according to predefined templates. Now, if you look at this diagram, we're going to see some similarities. In the middle here, there's a networking account using that transit VPC with, instead of a Cisco CSR, it's using a Fortinet appliance, but it really serves the same purpose, NATing into your environment. So once the traffic comes in from the data center in the top left, it goes through that Fortinet and into their core applications account. Now, this customer was doing some really cool AI ML work, and they were using some cutting edge AWS technologies. You can see they had Elastic MapReduce and AWS Glue, and using a lot of the AWS machine learning tools to further their actual development. Now, I've talked a little bit about this account vending machine, account factory terminology. What is this tool, right? Well, the tool is what allows us to spin out new accounts on an automated basis that have these guardrails in place. We want to make sure that every account has CloudTrail enabled. We want to make sure that there's logging. We want to make sure that there's monitoring. We want to make sure that each one can alert on everything that we're doing. So AWS created the account factory. Logicworks lives and breathes automation. So we want to be able to automate anything that we can, wherever we can. Service Catalog and Lambda, great explanation. So Service Catalog pushes a work stream through to the Lambda account. It pushes new CloudFormation stack sets into new AWS accounts that each have CloudTrail, config, EBS encryption stacks, admin access, and read-only roles in those accounts so that you can make sure that you're following the best practices while also deploying new infrastructure while you're deploying new applications in your environment. You can also see it's centralizing your logging into that centralized logging account with the S3 bucket. Control Tower is also a perfect use for a SaaS company. Logicworks has a lot of single-tenant SaaS models where their customers have to deploy a repeatable version of their application for every new customer that they build. But there's no need for sharing the environments, permissions across the different environments. Every customer is kind of isolated in their own environment. So it's a great use case. Each one has its own account that doesn't have access to the others unless we explicitly say it would, which if they're different customers, they wouldn't. And we can dictate at the organizational level which account has what level of access. Large, logically diverse organizations with different internal business units can leverage the Control Tower to manage these different business units within it. And each application that has the different requirements can manage those different requirements and each of their accounts their own way. They don't have to all subscribe to the same sort of management preferences as long as they have those accounts built out with that account factory that have the guardrails in place. Bottom line, SaaS companies make their money through their applications and not through their underlying infrastructure. This creates automation to govern environments so that your developers can spend their time developing your core business applications rather than managing infrastructure manually. We want to, like I said before, we want to automate everything you can, wherever you can. And I saved the best one for last, billing. Everybody's asking, well, how much does this cost? Well, the great news is, since it's really just the account structure and the networking structure with some guardrails in place, it doesn't really cost too much. But the benefit is, it allows you to manage your costs much better. Everyone wants to see, how am I utilizing the cloud? Where am I spending too much? Where am I overspending? Where am I underspending? Using the Control Tower framework, you can automatically break down your usage into multiple different accounts. It offers a built-in method to break down your cost per environment, per customer, per business unit, which allows easy chargeback to your different teams or to your different customers so that you're making sure that you're not overspending in one area, right? So if I go to my CFO, I can say, hey, we can see that account number 5 is using a lot of money and account number 4 isn't. But that's really because account number 4 is my centralized logging account that just has S3 logs, and account number 5 is what's made us millions of dollars. So you can tell me to spend less money, but it's making us a lot of money on a very, very easy, small spend. If you had all this in one AWS account, it would be much harder. You need to create a new tagging structure, you need to tag every resource, which is still recommended. You should still tag all of your resources. However, this gets you half the way there by breaking it out into multiple different accounts. So to summarize, AWS Control Tower is a great solution for complex, regulated AWS deployments. We want to automate anything that we can. Templates are always better than manual work. If you're manually doing something, you can fat finger something, you can forget, something that is often occurring in an environment is you open a port that you didn't mean to, or you leave one open, or you open something to the world because that's the default. If you automate this, you make sure that every time it gets deployed the way that you intended and the way that was vetted and linted through your code. Finally, your team should be careful about evaluating whether you should use multiple VPCs in a single account or multiple accounts, because even though there's a lot of automation to make this easier for you, it's still a little bit of work to manage a multi-account structure on the back end. So if you've got a one-tier application, maybe you should just stick with a multiple VPC in a single account, or if you have multiple different applications, then a multiple account structure is better for you. Just a little bit about Logicworks. We are a leading provider of cloud migration and managed services. We are a premier AWS partner and a gold partner of Azure. We have security, migration, healthcare, DevOps, MSP competencies in AWS, and we are an expert MSP for Azure. And if you want to learn more about AWS or have one designed, we're happy to talk to you. So thank you, and reach out to us at websales@logicworks.net. Ron, back to you.
All right, thanks, Donovan. Very insightful there. Good insights. One question, Donovan, is that these same basic concepts and these same parameters where you want to control accounts from a security, compliance, financial perspective, Logicworks as well can help organizations who might not be a multi-billion or multi-trillion-dollar bank who has all this complexity. These same kind of strategies are not just limited to the Fortune 50, correct?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So any customer can really use this solution. It's AWS's recommended best practice for migrating any workloads into the cloud because it has those guardrails in place. Logicworks has worked with customers that are just starting in the cloud, startup businesses, and we've worked with clouds that are 100 years old that have thousands of servers in their infrastructure data center. So we can really do either one, and this solution works for both, just because we want to make sure that those guardrails are in place.
I think that's good insight. So when organizations are looking to embrace the cloud, you're looking at migrating your apps to the cloud, whether or not you're using AWS, or if you've got questions about Azure, or you want to mix and match. I've seen firsthand Logicworks' expertise in making those kind of hybrid cloud or multi-cloud environments work very seamlessly. I'm going to encourage everyone, you see the Logicworks email. You can go to angelbeat.com if you have any specific questions as well that we can answer for you. We are rapidly expanding our digital online community and great content available for on-demand viewing. I'll look forward to seeing you at a live event in the near future where we're going to have great speakers like Donovan. Donovan, do you have anything else to add? But I think this was great information to complement your strategy around AI, DevOps, IoT. Don't overlook account management and the value of Control Tower.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. The one thing I would add, as you were just mentioning, there are solutions in Azure as well. And the benefit that Azure has is that their account structure kind of does this by default, right? By the tenant and subscription model. So for those of you who have migrated to Azure or are looking to migrate to Azure, a lot of this is already defined with the enterprise framework. But you just want to make sure that your best practices are enabled through automation with each subscription that you're deploying. But like I said before, we're happy to help you on either platform. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you at a live Angel Beat event. I'm going to end the webinar now. Thank you very much.